You all know what they saw. They saw what we saw. They saw the frail elderly man who needed help getting off the stage. They're just too chicken shit to tell us about it because they accurately deduced that he could still be the Democratic nominee and they don't want to ding him up. Maybe you give Barbara a pass. Who gives a damn what this singer saw or says? But you know what? Jimmy Kimmel happens to be employed by ABC, which happens to have a rather large news organization. And he has been one of President Trump's most vocal critics. Where are you, Jimmy? On vacation? Not good enough. You can still use your thumbs to send out a tweet. You could set the record straight right now, but you won't.
What happens when Joe Rogan and Megan Kelly team up for a blazing, no-filter roast, and Jimmy Kimmel ends up as the unlucky bullseye of their jokes? Suddenly, it doesn't feel like late-night comedy anymore. It looks more like an emergency career intervention, with ego-crushing punchlines and truth bombs packed with extra spice, turning the whole situation into a full-on wildfire where Kimmel might as well be the marshmallow getting slowly toasted over the flames. This isn't some simple celebrity disagreement. It's a verbal demolition derby in prime time, and Jimmy clearly stepped onto the track without a helmet or a plan. So what did he actually say to set off all this chaos and smoke? Keep watching, because this whole thing is messier than a full-blown Twitter meltdown and twice as hard to clean up.
Yeah, all of a sudden the ideology shifts because so many people are compromised by this very thing that we were talking about before. The very thing that they use to control the media in terms of the news, they use it to control the media in terms of late night talk shows and monologues as well. It's the same influence because they're the same sponsors. The same people are spending the same money on the same networks. And it has an impact. If it affects your livelihood and affects your future and your ability to do this thing that you love doing, which is hosting a talk show, and you're doing it on a network that is paid for by that money, guess what? That affects you.
Once upon a time in the world of late-night TV, where everything looked shiny, safe, and perfectly sincere, Jimmy Kimmel played the role of the main jester, the guy famous for beer-chugging skits and wild bikini bounce house bits that push the goofy limit just enough to make people gasp and laugh. Now he's shifted so far from that image that he almost looks like Hollywood's Dalai Lama, clutching his moral pearls at every new crisis with the very same hands that once celebrated loud fart jokes and rowdy party humor. What changed to flip his whole persona this dramatically? Well, Joe Rogan and Megan Kelly have some strong ideas about that, and they did not keep them quiet at all. They threw them out into the spotlight loud, sharp, and impossible to ignore.
Just this past 2 weeks, they had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored? At the Kennedy Center. You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the Academy Awards in full blackface?
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Crystal.
Ooh.
Billy Crystal. And do you know who's going to be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken inner city sort of urban accent saying she needs to darn those socks? Jimmy Kimmel as Oprah, as a fat-suited, black-faced, darning socks Oprah. Now, if you are of the left, that's fine. If you are of the right and happen to just say, hey, people used to wear blackface and nobody freaked out about it, you get fired.
First in the ring is Joe Rogan, the MMA commentator turned podcast titan and full-time wrecking ball aimed at anything fake, sugary, or overly polished. And he doesn't slide softly into criticism. He charges straight in like a caffeine-loaded rhino, ready to crush anything pretending to be real. To Joe, Kimmel isn't just another late-night host reading jokes from a desk. He's a leftover relic from a time when comedy actually meant taking risks and saying something honest, not just smiling while reading cue cards stuffed with safe, shiny virtue.
That sort of self-censorship and the idea of being a more empathetic person is a good thing, right? But as long as it's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, the problem with that kind of stuff is it continues to go in the same direction where more and more things become forbidden and toxic.
Rogan's view isn't about petty personal drama. It's about a deeper kind of disappointment, because when someone builds a whole career on being the regular person's truth teller, watching Kimmel slide into the role of Hollywood's moral concierge feels like walking into your favorite grimy dive bar and finding out it now serves gluten-free kale shots with inspirational quotes taped to every glass. It hits like a weird kind of betrayal, wrapped in a cheerful laugh track, a switch that feels staged instead of real. And Kimmel's evolution, or devolution, depending on how you see it, plays out like a full comedy sketch that practically writes itself. Only this time, the joke is on the audience that remembers who he used to be.
You know, the Elon Musk joking around about my pronouns are prosecute Fauci. Jimmy Kimmel made a tweet back to him. He said, your pronouns are ass and hole. Which is pretty funny. But then
Did he really?
Yes. And so then I read that, and there was people saying, please don't joke about pronouns. It's transphobic to joke about pronouns. So they were chiding him for participating in a joke about pronouns.
So Jimmy Kimmel was doing it. He was doing it too.
Yeah, he was doing it too.
The man who once rode the edge of comedy like a wild rodeo bull now clings to a shiny moral compass that somehow always tilts toward the loudest round of applause. And Rogan, always hunting for anything real, spots this glossy rebrand from miles away. It's not just a gentle shift, it looks like a full career Botox makeover with extra smoothing. Nothing screams, I'm still bold, like repeating the same safe political message squeezed between jokes that feel cleared by a nervous HR team, while Rogan's world stays messy, chaotic, unpredictable, and wildly human. A place where people can clash, argue, and still walk away without bursting into moral wildfires. Yet Kimmel seems wrapped snugly in the comfort blanket of Hollywood's safest opinions. And what Rogan sees is a man who traded his raw comedic spark for polished Instagram approval. Someone who was once surprising but now feels totally beige and painfully predictable. It's like watching a 90s punk rocker slowly transform into a smiling Whole Foods ambassador. Sure, he still tells jokes, but now they come with warnings, labels, and a built-in safety manual. Comedy that once hit like a punch now landing as gently as a carefully worded corporate memo. In a late-night landscape scrubbed clean for the algorithm and wiped down again for good measure, Rogan sees a row of clones telling the same jokes, pushing the same politics, and landing the same tame punchlines with no real risk and absolutely no bite left, turning late night into a daycare for ideologues reading from cue cards while Kimmel walks around as the friendly head babysitter, keeping everything under control.
Got the Sunday morning show with Stephanopoulos into the evening Academy Awards broadcast with Kimmel, and ABC elevating, the blackface loving Kimmel. They, at the same time, fired Chris Harrison, host of The Bachelor, for trying to defend one contestant on The Bachelorette for saying, gee, I know I went to this antebellum party, a couple years ago. I guess I didn't see anything wrong with it. And all he said was, are we judging her by today's standards, or are we judging her by, old standards, whatever. He was basically trying to say, are we being too hard on her? Got fired. Chris Harrison has to be fired by ABC. I don't know why, because he's not a committed leftist, because he's not out there more saying all the terrible things about Republicans that Jimmy Kimmel says. So this is them saying, we get it. We're an ally, right? And I guess maybe they're trying to make up with their racist past without ever acknowledging.
The man who once charged along the edge of comedy like a wild rodeo bull now hangs onto a gleaming moral compass that somehow always spins toward the safest applause. And Rogan, who hunts for realness like a focused bloodhound, picks up the scent of Kimmel's makeover instantly. It doesn't look like a mild change. It looks like a full career Botox overhaul with the shine turned up to maximum. Nothing shouts, I'm still daring, less than repeating the same recycled political talking points tucked neatly between jokes that sound like they were carefully cleared by a nervous HR department, while Rogan's world stays loud, unsure, sometimes wild, but always real. A space where people can clash and disagree without burning each other to the ground. Yet Kimmel seems tightly wrapped in Hollywood's safest comfort blanket, and Rogan sees someone who handed over his raw comedic spark in exchange for social media approval. A guy who used to be unpredictable but now feels completely beige and easy to predict from a mile away. It's like watching a 90s punk rocker slowly become the smiling spokesperson for Whole Foods. And yes, Kimmel still delivers jokes, but now they arrive with warning labels and safety notes attached, comedy that once landed like a solid hit, now dropping with all the excitement of a cautious corporate memo. In a late-night world, not just cleaned up, but totally bleached for the algorithm, Rogan sees nothing but copies repeating the same jokes, the same politics, the same dull punchlines with zero danger and no real bite. And the whole scene starts to look like a daycare center for ideologues holding cue cards, where Kimmel has somehow taken the role of head babysitter, keeping everything polite and under control.
Yes, hypocrisy is alive and well amongst these sanctimonious leftists. From Kimmel to De Niro to Stephanopoulos, they want you to believe they're better than you, more virtuous, more decent. But we all know the truth. They lie. They sin. They do the very things they accuse you of and the things they say they would never do. Evil things, like try to destroy people based on feigned outrage, from which they spare their own side.
The media loves a redemption story as long as you sing the right approved tune, and Jimmy has practically become the lead performer in that act. But here's where everything gets really juicy and a little shocking. The way Megyn Kelly breaks down the polished PR tricks and carefully staged apologies. She also reveals the real motive powering all of it, because Bill doesn't get forgiven for being truly sorry. He gets forgiven for switching sides at the perfect moment. It isn't actually about deep morals. It's about matching the market. A world where values are flexible, optional accessories, and loyalty to the main narrative is the only real rule. So now there are two very different attacks zeroed in on the same man, with Rogan calling out the plastic shell where a genuine comedian used to live, and Kelly pointing straight at the empty suit standing behind the media curtain, and both critiques land painfully close to the bone. Rogan sees a once authentic voice buried under studio gloss and approval addiction, while Kelly sees a strategic chameleon shifting colors just enough to survive each new outrage wave, and together they turn into the strangest tag team, one swinging a heavy bat while the other files a cold, detailed report, with the only thing missing being popcorn, because the comedy isn't even the real problem anymore. The real issue is that it barely even tries, as Kimmel, who once pushed past boundaries, now babysits them, turning his monologues into homework assignments designed to prove he studied the approved script.
They were saying that his tweet is transphobic.
Do you think in that case, do you think that's him or a writer? Can't you tell?
Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah.
No, it's him, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
good. That's a good one.
He's a comic.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, he used to host The Man Show. I mean, he's done some pretty outrageous shit back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, for he-he's and ha-ha's.
No, that's a good joke on top of a good joke.
Yeah, it's a good joke.
But viewers never tuned in to be graded like students. They tuned in to laugh, to escape, and somewhere along the line, the jokes quietly turned into lectures, and the punchlines morphed into mini TED Talks with flashing applause signs instead of genuine laughter. That's what Rogan and Kelly highlight so sharply, the absurd and almost surreal picture of a man who once stood for wild, irreverent humor, now acting as the official voice of scripted outrage, a comedian who used to expose hypocrisy now practically scheduling it on a production calendar. There's no real rebellion left in that setup, only slick rebranding. And in the strangest twist of modern media, the more Kimmel preaches and moralizes, the more hollow it all feels. Not because morality itself is bad, but because the whole thing looks obviously manufactured, with every teary speech and carefully wrapped outrage moment, crafted for social media like a new product launch begging for clicks. Sincerity starts to feel like a group assignment where everyone is graded on messaging, and the result is clear. Late-night TV has turned into an echo chamber so loud and self-satisfied that it can't even hear its own noise, while Rogan, in his chaotic bunker, wonders when comedy turned into a PowerPoint presentation, and Kelly, sitting in her polished media war room, watches the same clown car skid off the same road over and over again. Kimmel might stay mostly quiet about their critiques, but he doesn't really need to speak, because at this point, his silence weighs more than his long monologues. Now it's less about what he says and more about what he has become. A punchline with no setup, a moral compass linked to a brand strategy, a performer starring in a show that fewer and fewer people actually find funny anymore.
Now, I will tell you, he's not the worst. The Daily Show has the worst ratings. They only have 366,000 people watching that show. During the Jon Stewart years, it was over 2 million. Now it's down to 300,000. Seth Meyers, absolutely dreadful. He doesn't even have 1,778,000. I mean, for network television, this is, you don't have to pay for it. It's there when you turn on your TV, you plug it in. That's a dreadful number. Greg Gutfeld on cable, which you do have to pay for, it has more than double the numbers of Seth Meyers. Jimmy Kimmel, 1.5 million, averaging, also equally horrible.
They didn't even need to invite him to a formal roast. They simply looked at the whole act and called it exactly what it is. A sitcom without a real script, a sermon dressed up with a laugh track, an empire built on irony, now trying to sell packaged sincerity at discount prices. This is the point where everything starts to feel like a wild Netflix documentary titled The Day the Clown Cried for Ratings. Because when Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly both drag Jimmy Kimmel through the same muddy puddle, one coming in like a blunt force caveman philosopher, and the other dissecting his every move like she's preparing a major courtroom takedown, you can tell something much deeper is bubbling under that fake laugh track and glossy stage. It all boils down to the sharp divide between authenticity and performance, since Rogan's whole appeal comes from being raw, unfiltered, and bold enough to scare entire PR teams, never begging to be lovable, which is exactly why people lean in and listen, while Kimmel has reshaped himself into something closer to a walking human press release. His once edgy spark replaced with polished messaging, smoother hair, and a carefully staged moral high ground with a perfect scenic view for cameras.
They want to shut me down on being on McAfee. They want to shut me up from...
Well, that was the Kimmel thing, right?
Well, no.
Did you ever talk to that dude? Have you ever talked to him?
I've been on the show years ago, yeah.
Would you ever have a conversation with him in person?
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, they wanted me to be on his show in the summertime after I got traded.
Really?
There, obviously been some things that he had said about me that made me go, I don't know if I want to do that. I'd rather.
It's like watching a former punk rocker stroll into a PTA meeting wearing neatly pressed khakis and passionately debating gluten-free cupcakes because the man who once mocked Hollywood from the outside now completely is Hollywood, wrapped in branded virtue and sprinkled with whatever trendy belief the internet approves this week. Rogan's take is that Kimmel isn't really evolving at all. He's dissolving into a soft, safe puddle of applause-chasing goo, while Megyn Kelly steps in like a sharp corporate investigator carrying a stack of receipts. Not impressed that Kimmel used to be funny, but fascinated by how perfectly and completely he's been repackaged and sold to the crowd. To her, this transformation looks a little too well-timed to be real growth, more like moral Botox that appears smooth on camera but feels fake underneath and needs constant touch-ups to stay relevant. And together, Rogan and Kelly don't just criticize the man, they rip the curtain off the entire system that now supports him, leading straight into the sad story of the lost art of comedy. Remember when comedians actually took real risks, made people squirm in their seats, and sometimes even forced the audience to question what they believed? Those days feel long gone, replaced by comedy that's been softened, sedated, and shoved into a neat little merch store where every punchline has to be PR approved, brand safe, and thoroughly sanitized for everyone's protection.
I've got serious questions about whether any of this is true. I mean, in every job I've ever worked, I've had people who would jump through brick walls for me, and I can be a tough boss. I'm not an asshole, but I'll say, like, that was a shitty packet. Like, we need to do better. That was not okay. And the team, my team loves me and I love my team because we are all about putting out great work product. And I'm quick to compliment too. Like, what did he say? He basically said, are you okay? Seriously, do you need help? That's causing people to lose their hair? People need to toughen up. Your workplace is not your nana's lap.
Rogan looks at all this and practically shouts into his microphone about it, while Kelly spots the same problems and simply lifts a sharp, knowing eyebrow. Yet both of them land on the exact same conclusion. We've traded real, gut-level laughter for polite audience claps that reward whatever sounds ideologically correct instead of what's truly funny. Comedy has been reshaped into a kind of sermon, with Kimmel acting like an overly serious preacher reading from the gospel of whatever is trending that week. And the media doesn't just allow this, it actively pushes for more, because the safer and more polished your content is, the bigger and friendlier the coverage becomes. Kimmel doesn't just manage to get by in this world, he thrives as the perfect model, the updated late-night host with less bite and far more moral superiority, leaving us at a strange cultural crossroads where people like Rogan and Kelly, messy but fiercely independent, swing at the walls of the media bubble while Kimmel and others stand inside smiling through carefully rehearsed sincerity, floating along on public approval like a duck gliding across a designer hotel pool. But this isn't only about one comedian losing his edge, it's about an entire entertainment world that seems to have forgotten how to laugh unless the target is safely pre-approved. A world where satire that once had sharp teeth now barely nibbles at anything, soft and harmless like a tofu piranha pretending to be dangerous.
I don't think that conversation is a conversation that should be held in front of an audience in 5-minute chunks like they do on television.
Yeah.
That's a conversation that you have to let air out. I want to know why you think the way you think. Him, sit down with Jimmy. Why do you think the way you think? Why would you think that it's okay to say that it's a real simple thing? The people that have been vaccinated, you treat them. And the people that took horse goo, rest in peace, Wheezy. Really? Is that really how you...
It's about what happens when comedians stop poking at the powerful and start going to brunch with them instead, because when comedy forgets who it's supposed to mock, the punchline doesn't just weaken. It turns strangely tragic and uncomfortable to watch. If you need a clear picture, imagine a clown who once flipped tables and threw pies now, sitting calmly at one, sipping herbal tea while studio executives praise him for being brave, and the crowd isn't really laughing. They're clapping nervously, pretending the serious speech they just heard was comedy instead of a careful confession. So yes, Rogan swung the hammer and Kelly used the scalpel. But it was never just about Kimmel as a single person. They were both examining the same thing, the artificial, calculated, almost humorless core of modern media. And the wild twist is that the punchline actually landed, even though nobody was really laughing at it. Late night once felt like a 2 a.m. bar. Messy, risky, unpredictable, sometimes inappropriate, but weirdly honest. Now it feels more like a corporate team-building seminar, run by someone who forgot what fun even looks like. And if anyone is still confused about where the spark disappeared to, Rogan and Kelly basically handed them a map with arrows drawn in red ink. Because when Joe Rogan, the human Molotov cocktail, and Megyn Kelly, the sharp-edged PR assassin, both lock onto the same target, you don't get a friendly interview, you get a full autopsy. And the subject on the table isn't just Kimmel, it's everything he has come to represent in that shiny studio world.
Back in the day when I was on the prime time of Fox and you were on the prime time of CNN, a couple of hours after our shows ended, late night comics would come on, and they occasionally would make us laugh, Pierce. As you know, they've abandoned that game now, and they're just political operatives out there. Look at this.
Hey there. How are you doing? If you watch the show regularly, I'm guessing you're not doing great.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare, for our clients.
It all comes down to a culture built on fake growth, staged courage, and echo chambers that only reward comedy when it flatters the right people. Because Rogan and Kelly didn't just call out Jimmy Kimmel, they yanked back the curtain on the entire scaffolding holding up his stage and image. And they didn't attack with wild anger, they did it with cool disappointment, sharp sarcasm, and perfectly timed side-eye. The kind of ridicule that doesn't need to shout because it smirks instead, leaving a silence that hits harder than any dramatic mic drop ever could. So the next time Kimmel climbs into his moral lifeguard chair to warn America about the dangers of mean tweets, maybe pause and ask whether you're watching a comedian or a commercial selling a new flavor of Kool-Aid, because the jokes used to be the point. And now, they just feel like the delivery system wrapped around the lecture. And if anyone out there is still laughing at all of this, Rogan and Kelly are left with only one real question. At what exactly are you laughing? Welcome to the roast that never even needed a stage. Just two sharp critics, a hollow brand standing in the spotlight, and a punchline so obvious it practically wrote itself while the cameras kept rolling.